over 7 million different animals inhabit our planet.
So just looking at the sloth, Angie, there's 6 species, and they're broken out into 2 categories. There's the 2-toed sloths and the 3-toed sloths.
What can they teach us?
It's
just so unique.
Like an ecosystem. They have their own ecosystem, each one of them individually. So
Many species are in crisis and need your help. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.
Hey, this is Chris. Hey, just a quick update. Angie and I are doing great. It's just every August, it seems like Angie and I kind of slow down a little bit, catch our breath with the podcast. And usually it coincides with Angie traveling up to Michigan, which she's just getting back with her family. And I've been traveling quite a bit too. So we're releasing the episode finally on sloth that we did last year for our Patreon only subscribers. Shout out to all of you that are supporting us. Thank you so much. It's really helping us. As we try to pinch and save money, we're going to try to redo the website and really start pushing out this information, because after, we're closing in on 3 years, we have generated, hundreds of hours of content, and we want to just push that out there. It's free education on conservation and on all these species. So that is helping out so much. So thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers. So we're going to release the sloth episode right now, and then we'll be back soon with new episodes. We've got some interviews lined up and some exciting things coming. I think in year 3 is really where we're going to really start booming. We've had phenomenal growth this year. Thank you, to our listeners around the world. During the COVID pandemic, it seems like we just have seen incredible growth, which is good because people are learning about these conservation issues. But as we come together as a world after this pandemic, focusing on things that affect all of us, I think, hopefully one of the good things that come out of it is, we realize we are one world and animals are suffering. The environment is degrading quickly. And we need to come together as a species, it's not as separate countries, but as one species, Homo sapien, as humans, to fight these changes that we're seeing and reverse them and preserve our environment. So thank you to our listeners. We hope you really enjoy this one. This one's really special, actually. Sloth was an amazing episode that Angie and I had a really great time recording. So hope you enjoy it and look for our new animals coming up. We've got a slate of exciting species to come. So take care. Welcome to All Creatures Podcast. This is Chris.
And I'm Angie.
And Angie, we're talking sloths today.
I know. It is going to be a super fun podcast.
It's just one of those mammals I think people forget about a lot. And then you go to a zoo and you're like, oh yeah, sloths. Oh my goodness, sloths are so cool. They're just so unique.
Right. Exactly. They do sometimes, I think, obviously get a little bit of the back burner for some of maybe the more faster or larger animals. But yes, if you've been blessed enough to be up close and personal, or just taking the time to watch some sloth videos, there's some great shots out there by BBC and of course National Geographic, then you get it. And to be completely honest, until I started researching this week, I had forgotten how cool they were too. And then I learned a ton of facts that that I didn't know. So it was like deep dive sloth week. In fact, a lot of the incredible information that I learned about them this past week, I actually just shared with one of the classes I'm teaching instead of teaching them evolution. I use the sloth because they have some really amazing evolutionary feats, if you will, or you'll just find out some really fun things about their evolution today. But yeah, I just literally talked about the sloths for half the class because then I just skipped the material, and I'm sure we'll make it up at some point in time, but I couldn't control myself because I had to spread the sloth love. And so hopefully after this pod, our listeners will be as psyched about sloths as I became this past week. And
are you kidding me? Me too. Throw me on that bus because the stuff I learned, I was like, are you kidding me?
I know.
I never knew this.
I had no idea.
I never knew this.
And I didn't get to work with sloths, but some of my good friends did. Dear zookeeper friend of mine, Amy, I remember going over to the small mammal building and getting to feed some sloths behind scenes. And so just to make the class laugh, I showed them today what it was like. I was a sloth feeding myself a grape because that's what we would feed them for like behind the scenes tours. And it really, the students thought I was making fun of myself or making fun of but I wasn't. It was really, it's like slow motion. You hold the grape up to them. Just imagine slowing the bite down about 30 times, and it's slow motion, because most animals, when you feed them, the thrill is gone so quick because they just snatch it up, right? I mean, I've fed giraffes before and rhinos, and it's wonderful, don't get me wrong, but it's over pretty quickly because they just grab it and go.
Right.
But this was like, it was like frozen in time, the memory of just how slowly they just open up their mouths. They're very gentle, very kind, very respectful, great table manners, also hanging upside down. And just slow motion eating whole grapes. And it was a magical experience. And but I didn't know a lot about their physiology. I knew that they were cool. I knew they hung on trees, things like this. So it's been a fun week, and hopefully our listeners at the end of this will become sloth experts as well.
I know. It was like 6 weeks ago at the LA Zoo, and our friend Madison and Mike took us behind the scenes, and we got up close and personal to a sloth, and he was just hanging out upside down, which you're going to find out why they'd like to live upside down today. But it was a magical moment. I got some pictures. I think I posted one on Instagram. I'm going to post more, obviously, as we promote this episode. But, I had to go back and rewatch Planet Earth 2 today just to see it's the very first episode. They opened up with the Pygmy three-toed sloth, who we're going to talk about today and really kind of talk about their critically endangered status. But it's the scene where it gets down and swims over to, he thinks it's a female, climbs up the tree. And there's a female there, but she has a baby. It was the wrong one. And
Chris,
you're going to find out why that was such a crazy journey for him.
Well, it was, but it's so funny you mentioned that, because talking about sloths and then me sharing with them, and they swim. They don't walk very well. It's, in fact, them walking is not very pretty. It's a crawling, if motion at best. It's just not great. But then I mentioned that they are great swimmers. And one of the students was like, let's see a video. And so, of course, because of technology, we can do that. And so I pulled up that same clip, and they were just mesmerized. They're like, we can't believe sloths swim. And I know. And obviously he was such a great swimmer. So it's just but that video footage is stunning.
Oh, they're amazing. And then, for anybody that's seen Zootopia, one of the best scenes I've ever seen in a movie, cartoon movie, was the DMV being run by a bunch of sloths.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, that's funny.
And they were just so slow. And then he was so slow telling the joke. And they're like, the DMV, because that's how we all feel about the DMV here in the United States, the Department of Motor Vehicles. When you go get your driver's license, it's a bear here in the States. But anyways, it just, they're so endearing, and you're going to learn where they're from. But Central and South America, and again, just want to highlight that the Amazon is still burning as we record this. Looked up today an update. The update was, at least in September, a lot of the fires died out, but it's still burning. I mean, it's still burning. And the sloth is the slowest moving mammal on Earth. And
it's incredible.
So you imagine, that if those fires, like, a lot of sloths lost their lives in it, it just breaks your heart, because they're just such an amazing species. Now, this is for our Patreon only subscribers. So we just want to thank you so much for supporting us and conservation. You definitely are contributing to conservation. We keep sending checks out each month to an organization that you choose. So thank you for that. You're giving back to us, and we're giving back. So we're all making a difference. You're really helping us grow. And just for you, I just kind of wanted to give you an update on the podcast on where we are, because Angie and I are getting ready to enter our third year. And we're on the map, Angie. I mean, we are on the map. Our podcast is on the map. We're on the front of iTunes Science.
I know. So
you go
exciting.
Down there.
Who knew?
There we are.
It's crazy.
I know. So, just looking at statistics, there's 700,000 podcasts circulating on the planet right now. 700,000. And there's more and more animal themed, conservation themed. And I could argue with anybody that, not to pat ourselves on the back, but, we're probably one of the top animal related podcasts. And that's because of our listeners. Our listeners help put us there. If you look at that, our ranking, we are in the top 1,000. Sometimes I think we spiked as high as 50 in the All Science podcast once. So if you look at that statistics, we're in the 0.002% of all podcasts in listenership. So thank you to you and your support. It just means the world to us. We're dedicated to this. We are going to keep working hard. We believe in this mission. We believe in the message and what we're doing. So thank you for helping us get there. And we're going to keep growing. We're just going to keep growing.
Yes. And our moms will keep listening and helping us grow too.
Yeah, no. At least we're out of our mom's basement now.
Barely.
When we started.
Barely. But yes.
Barely. So just looking at the sloth, AG, there's 6 species and they're broken out into 2 categories. There's the 2-toed sloths and the 3-toed sloths. And I know you sent me some information, so we're going to get into why there are here in a minute, why there's 2 separate families. And then, of course, we talked about the pygmy 3-toed sloth that is critically endangered. So that's the one we're kind of going to focus a little bit on today. But we're going to cover generally sloths because they're all generally similar, which is crazy between the generally behavior, physical features.
Yeah. Well, how about this?
Similar.
We'll let the listeners be the judge of how similar they are.
The judge.
Mm-hmm. But it is Sloth Week. We're covering sloths in general because they're definitely all in need of us knowing more about them and sharing more about them because their habitat is so precious and we need to keep them around for a long, long time. As you'll learn, they've been here for a while and they've been doing their uniquely odd behaviors and physiologies for millions of years. So,
well, I think the point I was trying to make with that is, they're generally similar in that they're not evolutionarily similar.
There it is. Yes, that I can.
Yeah,
they're not evolutionarily similar, but yes, they do.
No, they're totally separate, which we're going to get to. But here you have an animal that behaves similarly, looks
moves very
similarly, moves very slow, lives in trees.
Spoiler alert: they move really slow.
Yeah, so it's crazy. Like this information that you learn on these animals is just amazing. It's amazing. So I can't wait till we get more into the weeds of this. Now, just to talk about what sloths look like, it's a fun animal to try to describe. But we just look at the pygmy 3-toed sloth, right? Mm-hmm. So let me just give you some physical size. Okay, so the pygmy is smaller than all the other species, all of their 5, but not by much. Their body length's about 21 inches or 53 centimeters. The largest claws on any sloth is 4 inches long, so a bit smaller in the pygmy. They weigh about 8 pounds or 3.5 kilograms. Mm-hmm. Now, the 2-toed are larger. They can be up to 33 inches long and weigh up to 20 pounds or 8 kilograms. So they say pygmy, and it's not looking at a tamarin versus a gorilla. Right. It's, it's not a huge difference. It's not a huge difference.
But still.
Now, color patterns. Yeah. So it's color patterns. You're looking at this wiry hair is kind of how I described it. Tan, light brown, dark brown in some species. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you mentioned their fur. And it's like long and almost wiry-like, very thick, dense fur, especially for living in a jungle. You would maybe think that it's hot and they shouldn't have as much as they do. And of course, it's going to vary from species to species. But what I really fell back in love with was their face. Mm-hmm. But they have this short head, if you will. We'll talk a little bit more about their vertebra and things like that. Mm-hmm. But their face is flat-ish, if you will, and they have a stub nose. Somebody even described it as like a pug nose. That's maybe a little bit too dramatic. But yeah, just these rudimentary small ears, really large eyes. The cutest button stub nose. I think I already mentioned that, but I have to mention it again because it's super darling.
Yep.
And then their facial coloration patterns are going to, once again, vary slightly depending on the species, as far as having some black highlights or white in their face or even down their back. Certain species have a little bit of more darkish black colors and white color patterns. So well, obviously check out our show notes or just Google some images and you can kind of see the differences between each species, but they're strikingly, as Chris mentioned, pretty similar.
Right. And so watching, and I'm going to give a spoiler alert to, a little bit here in a second. We're going to talk about this, but they have algae growing in their hair, and that's natural for them. And it gives them like a green highlight.
Sure.
I never paid attention, but you watch this Planet Earth 2 episode and you see it. I was like, oh my goodness, there's the algae right there. And it's critical for them. You're going to find out today why they have the algae growing. And I just never noticed it. And I saw it and I was like, oh my goodness, it's true. Look, there it is. So it was awesome. And you want to stay tuned too, because I'm going to talk a little bit about how slow sloths are, or really how fast they are. They might be faster than you think. We'll see. We're going to get there. I
think it depends on where they're at.
Yeah, that's true. Now, like we opened up, this is Central South America. Their ranges, depending on the species, tend to overlap, which again is very interesting because the two-toed and the three-toed are just so dissimilar evolutionary speaking. Now, the Pygmy three-toed sloth, this is the one that's critically endangered. The reason being is it's only found on the isla. Oh, I'm going to butcher this. From Panama. It's an island off Panama. And it's
Isla. Got your back.
I know, you got the Spanish. I'm going to try it. Isla Equidos de Veraguas? Veraguas? Oh, yeah, you're going to blow me away.
Let's see. Isla Escudo Veraguas. Close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, I lose.
Well, I'm not going to win any awards. My Anna always teases me that my Spanish accent has a lot to be desired.
That's okay. It's you. Much
I
better
try.
Than I am.
That's the story of my life. I might not be great at everything, but I definitely try.
Yeah. It's my Spanish. Even after taking high school Spanish, terrible. So, but looking at where they range, I mean, when you're looking at South America, it's, South Brazil upwards, into Colombia, and then into Central America up into Mexico. So, all 6 species are kind of located in there in that part of the world. Now, this is where it gets just mind blowing. And I was looking up and I was thinking, okay, the ecological importance of sloths. And I was expecting to see, seed dispersal, things that we've been talking about routinely. But then I came across this article that sloths have their very own ecosystem on their body. And I was like, what is this? And it was crazy.
That's why the deep dives happened this past week, Chris. It was, I know. I never had thought about it from that perspective as well. And it was very eye-opening. So yes, keep going. I'm on the edge of my seat.
No, it was just, okay. So looking at these scientific articles talking about this ecosystem. So they have living in their fur, and the one critical one they talk about a lot is these moths, and I'll get to there in a second, but sometimes beetles, cockroaches, this fungus and algae in their fur, and they're endemic only to the sloth. Means they find these species on the sloth and nowhere else.
Mind blown. It is mind blown right there.
Yes, it has its own little ecosystem.
And I also talked to my class today about the co-evolution that's probably happened amongst this plant species, these invertebrate species, and then the mammal host.
Right. So this one article that it was about, I think 2014 when it came out, and these scientists were looking at, okay, one of the questions is sloths, and this is a little bit of a insight into when we get to the nutrition, but they come down out of the canopy. So these are boreal animals. They live in the canopy of the trees in these forests. They come down once a week to poop. which is a whole discussion we're going to get to.
I love talking about
it's
poop.
Very obscure behavior.
Let's go right now. What are we waiting for?
I figured you would. Yeah. So, but it was the behavior of it. Like, why do they leave these trees, the safety of the tree, to go to the ground?
Right. Because let's talk really quick about a few things they do while they're hanging in the trees.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everything. Sleeping, giving birth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, breeding, as far as researchers know. So, yeah, what's so special about leaving the tree to poop? And once again, too, when they're on the ground, they are extremely vulnerable to predators because they, like I said, they can't move barely. It's not pretty. We watched a video of them moving on the ground, and it's very hard for them. They have really long arms, and they kind of just pull themselves along with their arms. They don't have an upright gait or just anything, and so it's such a vulnerable place to be. Yeah, why would they do that? I don't know. Well,
later I'm going to address the main theory, but this theory is these moths that live in the fur, when the sloth goes down to poop, the female moths will actually fly down, lay their eggs in the poop, and then hop back on the sloth. Then when the sloth goes back in the trees, eventually these eggs will hatch. The moths will go, and once the grubs or whatever, then they become moths, and then they will go find their own sloth to sleep in or live in.
Oh, they go find their like little sloth townhome or studio apartment of their own.
Basically, I mean, yeah, it's like
nice.
Because the fungus and algae that grows in the sloth's fur, that's nutrients for these bugs, and so there's this mutualism going on that they found. The more moths they have, the more algae there's on the sloth. They think that the algae is actually used as a snack. The sloth will snack on it and eat some of the algae, so it provides some nutrients for it.
Oh, well, I read too that the algae acts as a great camouflage among the trees.
That too, absolutely.
Because they can especially smaller ones, they can get picked off by hawks, maybe even large tree snakes, and so. Okay, but they munch on it too.
Yeah, they found awesome. Some of it in their stomachs and stuff. So,
I mean, why wouldn't you, right? Yeah, I mean,
yeah. So
we all know when I drop crumbs on my like popcorn, especially like on my shirt. In 15 minutes later, I'm like, oh heck yeah, my snack. Lucky day.
You and all the moths that live on you, yeah. It's having a little buffet.
It's not that bad yet, but some days after taking care of the kids and myself barely, I'm gonna start growing moths. It's only time.
I bet. Oh, two little boys, they keep you busy. So that was mind blowing that they have their own little ecosystem on their bodies, and that it's very unique ecosystem.
But why can't they just poop in the tree and the poop falls to the ground and then the moths like really never leave them? Or
yeah, I think that's part of this theory. Now,
okay.
Do you want the spoiler alert? I can give it to you now.
Yes, it's kind of one of those. It's one of those nights. I've got my coffee. I'm amped up.
Okay.
Let's do this thing.
Okay, so the prevailing theory is, and that's what people are doing that now. Okay, so what we do know. Let's talk about poop real quick. They have to poop once a week, and they go down.
Let's talk about poop, Chris. Let's talk about
Why care? Why care about sloths? Because of their poop. So their poop, though, is like it builds up. It's about a third of their body weight by the time they go down the tree, which is crazy.
Well, I mean, if you're only pooping once a week, even if you have a super slow metabolism, that's not where I want to be.
So so you think about this. You're a sloth. You're building up feces. Why don't you just poop from the trees, right? It would be easier, less stressful. You're carrying around extra weight, which means you're going to find out about their metabolism. They're like pandas. They're very tired all the time. They don't have a ton of energy. So it takes a lot of energy to climb down to poop, right? And it takes a lot of energy to climb back up. So the moth theory, not everybody's convinced. The prevailing theory is what they think it is because it's usually used for pheromones and communication. So it's more of a behavior to say, here I am, because they poop in the same spot too. They go back to usually the same spot, like a latrine.
And don't they bury it or no?
I think they leave it out. I didn't see where they buried
Oh,
it.
they leave it out.
Yeah, but it's like a latrine, right? They go and they poop in the same spot.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But it's like a marker, like, hey, I'm here. And then they climb back up. And then so other sloths can smell that and know, okay, especially a female in estrus, if she's,
Sure.
Yeah. So they know.
Well, because that makes sense. Yeah. How would you, if you're in the tree and all of your, feces, and if they're dropping and going away all the time, how would they know how to find you, or if you're ready to be found, or things like that? Okay. No, I can definitely get behind that.
And they're talking about the moths. I mean, this is the moth theory. I think a pro for the moth theory is if they are pooping from high up in the trees, it would break apart, hit limbs, things like that, where the moths would have a hard time finding it. Whereas these ones that develop these behaviors over, thousands or millions of years, that they benefited more with this mutualistic behavior. So to be honest with you, it's still a huge debate. I mean, they still don't know. It's been something that's baffled scientists for
Is this a
years
slow
and years and years.
moving debate or pretty quick?
Yes.
Sorry, too many slow jokes.
Very slow. It's great. It's great. So that's the fascinating. Why care about them?
And
I think that's
sure. I mean, it's
just so unique.
Like an ecosystem. I mean, they have their own ecosystem, each one of them individually. So you get rid of sloths, you're definitely getting rid of the algae and these moths and a whole host of other things, let alone, like you said, the seed dispersing and just other normal kind of ecological niches that herbivores do that we've talked about in the past. So yeah, no, I think it's just so cool. And truth be told, there's probably a lot going on because there's so many insects that can be found within their little algae house that there's still probably a lot that we don't know about the different symbiosis or mutualistic patterns that have evolved through over a long time.
Right. I mean, it's fascinating. We got more stuff to come because these things are just wow. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the different species.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That was my next slide. So today, what you have, it's going to be so funny because these are the black sheep of sloth history. It's just so fascinating. So today, the sloths that we have today are broken up into two families. Very easy to say this one. Bradypotidae is the three-toed sloth. Okay. Megalonychidae. The second one wasn't as easier. Megalonychidae is the two-toed. Okay. So of the species, you have the Pygmy three-toed sloth, which I'll just give their scientific name and I won't on the others, but Bradypus pygmaeus is their scientific name. Okay. So three-toed. Then you have the mane sloth, the pale-throated sloth, and the brown-throated sloth. So these are all the three-toed. Then you have the two-toed sloth species, Linnaeus's two-toed sloth, and then Hoffman's two-toed sloth. Okay. So those are the 6 species. Now, sloth evolution, again, is just wow. It evolved, these animals evolved about 60 million years ago in South America. Okay. So they are part of the Xenartha superorder, which also includes, didn't know this, anteaters and armadillos.
Correct.
So sloths are related to anteaters and armadillos. You have this arboreal species living up in the trees
that eats like leaves
its relatives,
and stuff.
Yeah, is an anteater. I mean, we did an anteater, I don't know, 40 pods ago. So, but you look at their physiology, you look at the claws.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. You have these huge claws that anteaters use. We know this after covering them to tear open termite and ant mounds to get food. Well, the sloths evolved to use these claws not to tear up ant mounds or termite mounds, but to climb trees and to hang upside down. Like you think about it, you're like, holy smokes. That is insane. That is fascinating.
Yes.
Fascinating evolutionary history.
Yes, but it gets even crazier. And that's
it does.
and that's what I had my class on the edge of their seats. They were like, "What?" I mean, maybe it wasn't. They weren't as like fascinated as I was, but they seemed like an audience was really. They were really into it. We watched a couple videos, and I mean, it it was something. It's something. It doesn't make any sense.
It gets crazier. Mm-hmm. It gets crazier. Okay. So sloths first emerged 50 million years ago. Okay. 50, 60 million years ago from South America. Then they went into North America. Now, the environmental conditions during this time, millions and millions of years ago, this is where you get megafauna, right? Big, massive growth. Remember, we've talked about
bear.
Whoa. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sloth bear. What about the giant rodent, right? That was the size of a bull.
Yeah, well, sloth bear is, a sloth, whatever it's called. I forget what it's called, but it's pretty.
Yeah, it's coming. It's the giant sloth. Okay. Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. It's coming. Okay, it's coming. But this is when animals just got huge. There's abundant food, warm earth. Like animals were doing really well. Then 90% of all sloth species went extinct about 10,000 years ago. 90%. So all these ground sloths went extinct. Now they think the two prevailing theories are it was the end of the ice age. So you get a massive change in environmental conditions. And then who came marching over the land bridge and established themselves? And that was humans, Homo sapiens. So those two forces wiped out, mammoths and saber-toothed cats, and a lot of species went extinct around that time. It wasn't a mass extinction like we're seeing today, but it was still an extinction event where we lost a lot of biodiversity. Woolly rhino, there's one that went extinct around that time. So, like I said, these sloth today are the black sheep. They shouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. They're the only remaining remnants of this family tree of sloths. Mm-hmm. Most of them, the old sloths, were ground dwellers. They were huge, and they think the only reason these sloths survived is because they lived in trees, and so they escaped.
Right, but the even crazier part yes, they survived. So that's like the second phase of the amazingly crazy, awesome,
now we can go back.
Evolutionary story. The third part is not only did they survive two-toed and three-toed, but they are not even related to each other at all.
No.
So two separate, far away from each other
offshoots
on the phylogenetic tree, offshoots.
Mm-hmm.
Experience what is called convergent evolution of picking up same physiological traits due to the environmental constraints in the ecosystem at the time. For when they were evolving, it must have just been better to be up in the trees eating leaves to create a new niche or to avoid other predators, whatever it is. And so they did it separately, nowhere near each other, or near each other perhaps on in the continent of South and Central America. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that I understand it is they are like so unrelated. It's not like, how we're related to Homo erectus, or a chimpanzee, or a bonobo. It's like us related to tamarin or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like really, really far away from each other. And that's why researchers have determined and there's some physiological traits we'll talk about that make them definitely different. And, but what? Like, I just assumed, because, which you should never do, but that they were like just subspecies of each other, or species, but one needed two toes and the other one needed three toes, and we'll get into that a little bit more as well, why they're named what they're named. But no, this evolution stuff is nuts. They're so far away from each other, like two totally different lines.
It is. It's okay. So
give it to me.
We're speaking,
I gotta take a break here.
Okay. As we're speaking, the family tree is being rewritten. And one of the things I know you wanted to dabble in, and we won't bore our listeners with, but is proteomics.
Okay. Oh, I love proteomics.
Yes, they're using now, it's advanced technique looking at amino acids, and they've gotten samples from hundreds of thousands of years ago from some of these fossils they find of these sloths. So what they believe is millions of years ago, like tens of millions of years ago, is when a common ancestor split. And then you had small cat-like sloths, and then you had this huge giant sloth we're going to talk about here in a minute. But they think the ground giant sloths were the three-toe evolved, and then the smaller ground sloth is where the two-toed evolved. So think about the movie Ice Age, the kid movie. And
love it.
What's that character, the real dorky one? He's the sloth, right?
Mm-hmm,
so that ground sloth is what they think that the two-toed evolved from. And their last common the ancestor to them died out about 20 million years ago. So they've been around a long time. And they diverged tens of millions of years ago, not 100,000 years ago or recently in geological time. It was a long time. So here you have these animals living near each other, but two completely different families diverged a long time ago. They can't interbreed or any of that stuff. And it's just nuts. These animals are nuts. I think of all the species we covered, this is one of the ones that surprised me the most. I mean,
I know.
Wow.
I mean, just for anybody who follows us regularly, knows that, when evolution comes along, I kind of sit back and drink my coffee and let Chris work his magic, because he's so good at it and so passionate about it. And I love to learn. And sometimes I just don't have time for the deep evolution dives. But clearly, I couldn't control myself this week because it was just so shocking and amazing. And then, of course, why care about them? We talked a lot about their ecological role. But this is it's just so incredible. And of course, me, teaching ecology and behavior and things like that, it just really is an amazing example of this convergent evolution and why species evolve the way they do, depending on their environment and what works and what doesn't work. And it's working for the sloth, and it's been working for a long time.
It has. It's amazing.
And it's amazing. Like, who are we to take away their trees, man? They need the trees.
I know. We need to fight for sloths.
We need trees. Humans, we need more trees, obviously.
Yeah, we do. Okay. So then we got to, which I know you know about, because at the Florida Museum there on campus, we have a skeleton there of the giant ground sloth.
Yeah, I'll have to go with the boys and take a selfie, and we can put on Instagram or something.
Oh, please. So estimate, okay, the largest sloth, now that one in there, that's close. I'd have to go back and look at it. How tall do you think they got? The giant ground sloth, the biggest one.
I think like 10 feet maybe?
Yeah, that's what you think, the one there. The big one, okay, this is Megatherium Americanum, 20 feet tall.
Holy shnikes. Yeah, that's not the one they have. They don't have that at the museum.
No.
They'd have to build a bigger museum. Oh my goodness.
That's the one from North America that was smaller.
Yeah.
And this one weighed 4 tons. And the one that you're thinking of, the ground sloth that lived in North America, was only about 3 tons. So this one died out about 10,000 years ago. Okay. So not only do you have the huge rodent that we talked about in, what podcast was that? We just talked about it. It was a few podcasts ago, and I blew you away. It was the size of a bull. I forgot which one it was in South America. What rodent did we just cover? Squirrels. We were covering squirrels.
Right. Good memory.
Okay. So you had so many huge things in South America. Oh my goodness. Let's see what those humans, when they first arrived there, thought, like, oh my God. Anyways, so yeah, crazy history. And here today you have these 6 species hanging on. Now, here's some fun stuff. Sloths live 25, 30 years in the wild. The oldest sloth ever measured under human care lived to be 43.
Okay.
Which is pretty good. Pretty good life, Now, you did mention just special physiology, that they have this extra vertebrate in their neck.
Yeah, Chris. And once I really wrapped my brain around this whole evolution thing and how different 2-toed and 3-toed sloths are on the evolutionary tree, I wanted to know more, like, well, what else? And they do look pretty similar, as we talked about earlier in the pod, but a really key difference, which sets them uniquely apart from mammals in general, is the number of vertebrae in their necks. More specifically, the cervical vertebrae. Those are the ones that are just from the back of your skull down, right? It goes cervical vertebra, thoracic vertebra, lumbar, sacrum, coccyx, blah, 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 blah. And so it's crazy. The two-toed sloth have 6, sometimes 7 vertebrae. And us humans, we have 7. Most mammals have 7. Even giraffes have 7. You should fact check me on that, maybe with Google. I believe even giraffes have 7 cervical vertebrae. They're just really big and long, right? That's why they get their length or whatever. So having 6 is really bizarre for the two-toed sloth. But then the three-toed sloth have 9. So have 2 more. It doesn't even make any sense. And it is really rare. I was reading that really most mammals, like I said, have 7. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but the interestingly enough, manatees only have 6 too. So manatees are a little wonky. But there's other differences too, as far as the number of ribs they have, their tails, and then the lengths of their limbs. And probably something Chris and I maybe didn't talk about enough earlier in the podcast was how long their arms are. Compared to their legs, obviously for hanging and climbing. But they almost have a gibbon feel to them with that length, that extended arm. So it's just nuts. Two-toed sloths have 46 ribs, but three-toed sloths have only 28. What?
Yeah.
What? That is, Who knew? Right? Who knew?
I know.
And then
I know.
Three-toed sloths have a small tail, while two-toed sloths do not. And two-toed sloths have arms. Once again, they're about the size of their legs. Where the three-toed sloth, I should say, those are the ones that have the more exaggerated or longer arms. So, but a difference in your bones, your bone count, and your bone structure, and I mean that's when you can't interbreed, right? You're not.
No,
you are far from one another. So cool,
right, and it helps. Yeah, and it helps them. I mean, one of the things that helps them is rotate their head, and 270 degrees. I read somewhere else 360. Almost 360. I didn't quite believe that one, but a more reputable source had them at 270 degrees. So they can, see a lot around them. They're able to telescope that head around. So form to function, something you always like to talk about. Now, body temperature, I thought was quite interesting. It makes a little bit sense because they do have such a slow metabolism, but it's almost like they're cold-blooded. I mean, it ranges anywhere from 74 to 92 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Or 24 to 33 degrees Celsius. So they have a really low body temperature. Yeah,
that's like Toper time, time for going into kind of like a mild hibernation or something.
Hibernation, yeah. Yeah, and that's why, again, they just move so slow. When we get to nutrition, it will make sense in a second. Now, Angie did say earlier, they're incredible swimmers, so they can move about 3 times as fast in the water than on land.
Okay.
On land, like Angie said,
it's not pretty.
This is how fast they are.
Like for how adorable they are, it's not cute when they're.
Angie, they move on average 1 foot per minute or 30 centimeters.
Right.
1 foot per minute. They can't move.
They can't. I mean, they're really struggling. It's like you feel, like if you ever have seen a person struggling or an animal struggling, like especially with animals, my heart just goes out. Like, it's like you just, it's like, hurry up, go poop and get back in that tree, man.
Yeah, I know. They can move much faster than the trees, but when they move in the trees, again, they average about 125 feet per day or 38 meters. That's about all they go. They don't range very far. They don't move very fast. So answering that question from the beginning, they're not that fast. They're really not. They're slow moving, and it's just, again, form to function and how they eat. Now, what I did find interesting too is this starts making more sense. Why do sloths hang upside down? Many of these arboreal species.
Right. So it's a weird way to go, right? I mean,
yeah. So, I mean, we see a lot of primates, the squirrels we covered. They run along the tops of branches, swinging around. So why did sloths evolve to hang? And really what scientists believe is because, again, if you go back to the panda bear episode, they're eating a pure bamboo diet, not a lot of nutrients in there. So you don't have a lot of energy to move. So what they think is they evolved to hang because it takes very little energy to do that. And as they move, versus a species like a monkey that's in South America running around the treetops.
Right, brachiating from branch to branch. And
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So a monkey or a squirrel is going to have a high caloric diet, fruits and insects and things like that. So they have more energy to bounce around like that, where a sloth doesn't. So they move very slowly. They're hanging upside down, really to minimize energy expenditure. So that's kind of why they thought they do this. And that's how they've evolved to do that. And both two-toed and three-toed, similar physiology. Again, totally separate on the evolutionary tree, or very, very distant, but have evolved very similarly.
Because it works.
In the same part of the world, too.
Yeah.
I know. All right, so we talk about nutrition. Now, two-toed, a little bit larger range. They have a more varied diet, fruits, leaves, some animal matter, but again, not very high calorie. The three-toed sloths, much more limited range, and they eat only leaves. Okay. And they actually have the slowest digestion rate of any mammal. So they don't digest.
No wonder they only poop once a week.
I know. And that's why they eat the algae too, because they're hungry, and the algae is rich in fatty compounds, gives them some extra energy. So they think that is kind of why they evolved to eat that too. Now, sloths have a multi-chambered stomach like other herbivores. So they have certain symbiotic bacteria that helps break down the plant matter, but they digest it way slower than they eat it. And Angie talked about at the beginning how slow they eat. So digestion takes a long time, days. It takes days to digest those leaves that they eat. Now, we talked about the pooping behavior, so I thought that was kind of fun. So leading into normal sloth behavior.
Chris, that was a great lead into sloth behavior. It is, we've covered a lot of it, which is pretty much, they don't do much, or if they do it, it's very slow, and obviously with purpose. I think that's what I probably have the most respect about them when they are going down the tree to defecate. It's with purpose. They don't have many wasteful steps, where I myself have a lot of wasteful steps each day where I'm like, why did I come into this room? What am I doing in here? That'd be really painful if a sloth does that, because they move so slow. But we focused on, of course, how slow they are in this podcast. But I think what really blew my mind, and as we talked earlier in the podcast, about what great swimmers they are. In fact, they're such strong swimmers, they can reach 13.5 meters or 44 feet per minute. I think I can do that. Yeah, I used to swim on the swim team, so I could definitely do that. But they use these long arms to paddle through the water, and they're super graceful in it, as you mentioned in that BBC video. It's just, or documentary. It's really quite incredible. And then all of a sudden, all their awkwardness that is shown when they are on the ground just is completely removed. So it's just really quite remarkable, I think, that in the water element, they are pretty agile. And what also, we didn't talk about it in evolution, but a little side, like I said, how much I loved evolution. I was going on side sloth evolution tangents. And on one of them I went down there was actually a marine sloth.
Okay.
And it's obviously extinct. And I'm not sure exactly which time frame it was in. I'm not good like you are with all that, with all the time periods. But yeah, that it was a primarily swimming sloth. Like, I don't know what their diet was, but it had some of these adaptations to be in the water most of the time. And so maybe it's remnants of that. Who knows? But it's just pretty incredible when they get in the water. But for the most part, they do spend all their times in trees, and they do sleep a lot, up to 15 hours a day. And they pretty much just wake up to feed. So, and of course, the separate species are going to have variable times on how much they sleep. But just take my word on it. It's more than you and I sleep per night.
Right,
That's for
right.
sure. And then some.
Right.
And two-toed and three-toed sloths are mostly nocturnal, but they can be active during the day. But in general, Chris, they are motionless about 90% of the time. So there's your behavioral ethogram. That's their daily activity budget.
Right.
90% of the day. It's not, they're not moving. They're just there. So
how exciting would that be?
It'd probably it'd be like a good one for beginner behavior observations. What's the sloth doing? Nothing.
Right.
What's the sloth doing now?
Right.
Nothing. But what would be incredible is when they actually start to do something and you're like collecting the data, you'd be like, oh, here we go. But then it'd be in like slow motion. So you'd be able to collect all, because a lot of times when animals move fast, I always feel like I'm missing some data here and there. But yeah, with these guys, you should be able to catch a lot of it. But in general, they're relatively solitary animals. However, sometimes groups of females will occupy a similar tree, and the young can sometimes inherit the home range of the parents. Even though they are super cute and charming, and I obviously was thrilled to be able to feed them grapes back in the day, they are pretty gentle, but they have been known to defend themselves with their claws and their teeth if need be. But they usually don't like to do that. They usually rely on their camouflage and the algae and their camouflage to hopefully hide them and protect them.
Mm-hmm.
In general, not only do they not move much, but they don't really make a lot of vocalizations. They can let out hisses and low cries. In fact, that BBC, we'll have to put it on our show notes, but the BBC documentary of the Pygmy swimming, at the very end of it, he makes a little cry, probably because he was sad because
it was the wrong girl.
The one he wanted to be. It was the wrong girlfriend. He'd gone all that way and expended all that energy.
I know.
And she had a baby. She was closed for business, right?
Yep.
But so there's this vocalization, this little cry, and I was playing this video in class, and I played it over like 3 or 4 times, and the students were just laughing at me. I'm like, oh, it's so cute, because it was just like, whoa. Or I'm not making a good impression of it, but it was super cute because they don't really do a lot. So when they do make a vocalization, it's kind of fun to hang on to that. But three-toed sloths can emit a long, high-pitched call that will echo through the trees when they need to, and it sounds like an ah-ee. So, or eyes or something like that, depending on how you pronounce it. So they definitely can make noises. It's just not, they're not like the gibbons, right? The choir.
Right. Which is amazing. It's still amazing. I'm still blown away by that one.
Right.
Ugh.
But I think that's part of that's probably part of their behavioral ecology or whatever, is just be slow and quiet. We could all probably, at least us Americans, could probably learn a lesson or two from them. Just slow down, man.
I know.
Be a better listener. Like just listen and be quiet and kind of slow down and grow some algae on your back.
Now we know why it happens, because they don't do anything. It's moss growing on your head.
Yeah, exactly. They don't move, and then but you grow that algae and you have a little snap.
There you go.
You eat it, and I mean, it's not a bad life. So switching gears and moving on to the reproduction, I of course was super fascinated. I'm like, I need to know their courtship behaviors, because that's just got to be like hilarious. Like, what do they do?
Yes.
But unfortunately, I was a little shocked, I suppose, that we know a lot of general facts about their reproduction, but not a ton. We don't. There's not too many reports about their courtship behavior, or even them breeding. Like it's known that they breed in trees and things like that they don't obviously come down to the ground or anything. But yeah, it wasn't. I think we need that grad student researcher to go out there and sit there for 90% of the time watching them do nothing during breeding season to so we can learn more about them. And I would even do that because they're super cute to even just watch sleep, right? But what we do know is that three-toed sloths exhibit strong polygamy, and females are usually somewhat loyal or aren't very promiscuous. Mm-hmm. And so that males and three-toed sloths, if he's like the man, he's usually really successful at passing on his genetics. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He can mate with several females and father several offsprings. However, once again, because they are so separate on the evolutionary tree, two-toed sloths have weak polygamy. So the males are pretty much, in love with their female sloth, but the female is like, meh, and they're very promiscuous and will breed lots of males.
Yeah, of course. Well, good genetic diversity. Yeah.
I know. And of course it's fun to joke and make light of it because it's, it's funny because they're sloths. Yeah. But it really goes to show they're in the animal kingdom and breeding behavior. Those are two really separate types of breeding strategies. Whether you breed with a lot of the other sex or you don't, or and it all goes into how you pass off your genetics. Mm-hmm. And it's even more interesting too, because obviously you and I are repro dorks, but they basically have different birth season or what one research calls birth pulses. Mm-hmm. And that three-toed sloths mate during the late summer and early fall and will give birth the next year. And it's like a pretty fixed cycle. But two-toed sloths don't really seem to follow a seasonal pattern at all. They just give birth year-round, from what researchers can tell. Yeah. So once again, it doesn't seem like a difference unless it's like Chris or I that have studied this in cows versus horses versus pigs versus humans. But it's a big deal whether or not you can breed anytime or if you breed seasonally. They're just two totally different evolutionary strategies, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it's pretty fascinating. But when they do meet and breed, once again, we don't know a lot about their courtship behaviors, but I did spend a little time just in my own head picturing what those would be because they'd be slow and hilarious, right? Right. But what we do know is that females will often broadcast that they are receptive by making high-pitched screams. So she'll let them know. So she sends messages. That's good. A girl that knows what she wants. And one of the other interesting things that's been reported is that researchers don't really know why, but females do seem to exhibit really strong mate choice. Okay. And so mate choice is, and for lack of better terms, being picky. And it's good to be picky because you want to, get the male with better genetics or whatever. And so the females seem to be doing that, but once again, researchers aren't exactly sure why or how this benefits and or hinders their reproductive success. But once again, sloth copulations rarely witnessed. And when a female sloth does get pregnant, her gestation period is about 6 months, and she'll give birth to one offspring. And when the young are born, they're very little, about 10 inches in length, and they cling to their mom's belly, of course, for about 5 weeks or so until they really can grow some strength and move around. And sloth mothers do a really good job of caring for their offspring, especially up until anywhere from like 3 to 8 months, depending on the species and when the sloth needs to be weaned. But then during weaning, it gets a little bit, let's just say it's not necessarily unconditional love. The mother sloth will sometimes hiss or swipe. And sloth moms are overall very heavily invested, at least for the first 3 to 8 months, depending on the species, until the baby is weaned. Except there is one little hiccup. which researchers don't really know a lot about, but have observed in the wild that if a baby should slip and fall from its mother's belly or when it's clinging onto it, the baby usually will be fine because it maybe lands in some leaves or something, but the mother will rarely go retrieve it. And then on the ground, it's depending on the age, of course, of the offspring. It's going to be pretty tough for it to either get back up, or once again, it's pretty vulnerable to predators. And so a lot of times orphan sloths are taken into sanctuaries when they're found, and they're rehabilitated and released back in the wild. So bless people who do that. But yeah, so it is, kind of something that I can't really relate to as far as the sloth moms go. But I know. There's probably some evolutionarily behavioral reasons. I mean, we talked about how it is a big investment for them to get down the trees and things like that. So
right. It is. It's really hard.
And honestly, she might not even be able to crawl down and get her baby, like, as far as the up and down part before the predator comes, because it's like, so yeah, I thought that was, somewhat interesting observation. And of course, hopefully most of those sloth babies, all those sloth babies out there listening, hang on tight.
Yeah, I know. It's a harsh world out there. It's really harsh.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, that rolls into conservation, Angie. Like we said, we talked with the Pygmy three-toed sloth that is critically endangered. Now, the IUCN has less than 500, but obviously their data is a little old. The EDGE organization estimates maybe 100 left, and you saw something even less than that, right?
Right. I think IUCN was 79, but that was back in 2012.
Okay.
That was in 2012, so...
Yeah, so less than 100 is about what we're at. And this island is just, it's a small habitat. There's logging, trapping of the sloths. So they're in big trouble there. And then the other one was the main sloth that's listed as vulnerable. Now, what's interesting about this one is it lives where the golden lion tamarin lives. So on the Atlantic range on Brazil. And we talked about the difficulties that the golden lion tamarins were having with, living in that part of the world, the deforestation in that part of Brazil. So the main sloth is also feeling that too. So they're listed as vulnerable. And then the others we looked at least concern right now. So definitely, 2 of the 6 species are in trouble. And then as the Amazon and these other parts of the world, as these other parts of South America, this more deforestation, a sloth loses its home, and it can't just run away, it barely can crawl away. I mean, it can barely crawl away. So, it's sad. When you cut the tree down with the sloth, that sloth's toast. It's just horrible. It's horrible. So with that, you kind of gave me the nod this week on picking an organization. And the one I want to highlight is the Sloth Conservation Foundation.
Yeah, and I definitely, I was reading about them. Great.
Yeah. The reason I really like this group is it's newer and a researcher. So this researcher, Dr. Rebecca Cliff, who researched sloths, started this foundation. So she may be somebody we can try to get an interview, reach out to her to talk about sloths. That'd be so cool. Right. I'm telling you,
I'm a sloth lover. I'm on Team Sloth now.
Yeah, they're awesome. And so she started this foundation to help them. It's a nonprofit organization working down in South America and Central America to help preserve habitat and learn more about these sloths. So their website is slothconservation.com, and you can go on there. They have some wonderful information on that. Talks about what they're doing. You can actually adopt a sloth. So you can go in there and help sponsor a sloth. And
absolutely. Yeah.
So when you do that, you 100% of the proceeds goes directly to supporting their programs there. And you get a package and you get an adoption certificate, all that fun stuff. And you get to pick certain sloth. And they're just, oh my goodness, they're just so adorable. They're so adorable. And, they're doing research, they're funding research, doing outreach with education just a great organization to check out, the Sloth Conservation Foundation. And we'll put the link on the show notes there.
Yeah, and like them on Facebook too. They've got a nice Facebook page as well.
Yeah, just amazing organization out there fighting for sloths. And it was just one person who started it. So, that's what it takes. That's what it takes. One person motivation. We're still looking for that person for hippos, right? We still need a hippo organization.
Yes. I'm trying to convince John, and John's like, no, not hippos.
No way. No ways. Yeah. So, help the Amazon, conservation tips, use recycled products, because we are using some illegal timber from there. And then also, again, to help the Amazon, just pass on that cheeseburger every now and then, less beef overall. I mean, I know in America, we don't get a lot of our beef from South America, but again, we need to drive down global demand for beef.
Absolutely.
Because that is what is leading to deforestation down there is ranching, but bottom line. So, I'm making conscious choices to eat less beef and red meat.
I know. John has been doing amazing. We found this app called Meal Lime here in the States. I'm sure it's everywhere. And you can just say like, okay, I want to eat 2 meals, 3 meals, whatever, 4 meals this week that are vegetarian, or if you have some other kind of food preference like paleo or whatever it is. Yeah. And then you scroll through them, you find what you want, tap on the ones you want that sound delicious. And then it provides the whole grocery shopping list for you. And of course the recipes and all the nutritional facts, and it's free. And so John's been playing with it because he's such an amazing husband, and I've been so busy.
Yes, he is.
And so we've been eating all these awesome new vegetarian dishes that, I'm not even missing the meat. It's awesome.
I'm coming back to Florida. I'm hungry.
Yeah, he's got his like mad cooking skills on. It's quite incredible.
Nice.
When a lot of it's just like what you can do with basil or beans there's so much out there. It's fun.
There's so many good tasting vegetables too, and so you mix them in with pasta, or whatever.
That's what we had tonight.
So yummy. Okay. Well, I'm going to go eat dinner, Angie, but thank you.
I know. I'm hungry now.
But amazing podcast, amazing animal. I'm going to try to, chase down Dr. Cliff at some point and see if we can get her on for an interview, because that is just amazing that she did that all on her lonesome. Awesome podcast, my friend. And we're doing this right before you go to Africa. So this will be out while you're in Africa. Have a good trip. And we look forward to hearing back from what you learned.
Awesome. I'll be checking.
Come back from the Rhino Orphanage, please.
I will. I'll send photos, and I'll be checking in a lot. So it'll be like everybody's going to Africa, right?
Yeah. Yes. All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Great pod. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Yeah. Team Sloth.
Listen, learn, share. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.